Welcome to the NC Spin After Spin. Additional comments from our panelists just available on our website. John Hood, what do you wish you had said on last week's show, but you didn't?
Tom, we talked about the 9th District Congressional race, the subsequent investigations, as we should have. That's a top political story, not just in North Carolina, but nationally, and it has been for many of the weeks after the election. It's important for people to remember that allegations of absentee ballot fraud, impersonation fraud, which is, again, people need to understand, some of this is more legendary than has ever been nailed down. These are not unrelated matters, okay? The story used to be that you'd go into a rural county usually, you would identify people who don't usually vote, maybe shut-ins or whatever, you try to get them to vote absentee. If you didn't have them vote absentee, sometimes their relatives, the argument is, would go and vote in their names, so you wouldn't be detecting that in the way that our previous studies have done that. They have found very few cases of people voting in the name of somebody who was deceased, and that's all they looked at. They couldn't, of course, detect people who were voting in the name of someone who's still alive. That's probably still not very many, but if you're talking about a few dozen or a few hundred here or there, now you're starting about some of these very close elections being affected by either absentee ballot fraud or in-person fraud or other kinds of fraud, residency fraud. There are other aspects of this that have been mostly talked about but not seriously investigated for a long time. I was interested to read an investigation that was done back after the '94 election in the same area in a congressional race. Lots of the same kinds of stories about basically harvesting absentee ballots, filling out absentee ballots for people who are senile or who have learning disabilities, people who showed up on election day and somebody had already voted in their name. You know, these were actually in some cases substantiated in the investigation back in the 90s in Robeson County. Okay, but the argument was there weren't enough of them to overturn the results of a close but not a razor-thin margin, and so nothing was done. We need to change our thinking about this and go after some of these things, even if we don't have a clear confidence that it could have turned the outcome of an election, because it affects people's perceptions. And you know, to the extent that people say that the voter ID movement is driven by exaggerated fears, they're right about that. But the exaggerated fears are based upon years or decades, particularly on the Republican side, of stories about Democrats stole elections from us here, there, here, over and over and over again. That's how they think about it. And if we want to really lance that boil, we have to go after all these kinds of fraudulent activities.
So voting early and voting often needs to be eliminated?
It's a funny joke, except that for some people it is a real thing that they claim happened to them in the past.
Yeah, well, and I think what most people really care about is making sure our elections are fair and free of fraud.
But the truth is that people who are in politics oftentimes, you know what they care about is simply winning. And in the case of the Dallas character in Bladen County and maybe Columbus and others, part of the structure here was that he was going to be paid a very large bonus. So even if Mark Harris knew absolutely nothing about how Dallas handled the ballots, he's still responsible for the action with a ridiculous incentive project that is going to incentivize misbehavior, even if he didn't know about it.
Wow. Well, this is going to be a big story, I think, for some time to come. Thanks for watching the After Spin. We'll have more video all during the week on ncspin.com.